we've just given them information. We just teach them. We preach at them, but we don't equip them.
We were talking about math, and in geometry, I struggled, but I learned the information, and I could quote the postulates and theorems, but I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know how they worked.
When Jeremiah and Joshua were young, they would read manuals. They didn't like to read kid books. They would read manuals, and I'm like, oh boy, what have we created? and they couldn't even read. But Jeremiah would go through and read some of these manuals and how-to books. We would get how-to books from the library. He had not used the tool yet, but he got the information. But all that information would be worth nothing if he never, ever picked up a hammer or a screwdriver.
If it's Christian, we're talking about it. This is the Mike Charleston Show.
All right. Hello. Well, welcome to another episode. If you are watching on YouTube, you're going to have to pause for a little bit because this show was originally a podcast, and I'm going to explain why we weren't on last week and just kind of talk to some of our listeners a little bit here. So if you're wanting the main subject, just fast forward about 5 minutes or so. But so anyway, we were off last week because, well, we got hit by an ice storm.
Yeah.
A huge ice storm.
Well, not ice.
Well,
Water storm.
that's right. There was ice on the road later, but it was a snowstorm. A record 8 inches of snow in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yeah, awesome.
And it was crazy. A day
And
before.
the farther south you went, the more snow you got.
Yeah.
That was bizarre.
Yeah.
That's bizarre. But we that was the day before we were supposed to go on our family vacation. And so we really couldn't record, and we really weren't going to record. But anyways, then we went on our family vacation up in Georgia and finally got past all the snow and ice and ended up north with no snow.
We went north to get cleared roads.
Yes,
You know?
it was most bizarre. But all of our kids came down except for Hannah, who's up there in Canada. And but we had a good time. And got to spend a few days up there relaxing, and it went off without any major events or anything like that.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. But yeah, we had a pipe burst. So glad we didn't leave when we were going to leave, and we had to fix the pipe that burst. And then, yes, I covered it, but it still burst. It got cold. It got to 7 degrees.
Well, and I didn't realize.
It actually was a little colder here than it was. I think we got to 10.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Oh, you had to,
Okay.
we had more snow melt the first day. So it was the second day when it got so cold, and y'all still had more snow on the ground.
It's crazy. It was a weird. It doesn't happen very much.
Well, I didn't realize that I left the water dripping in our tub because it's pretty cold under the tub, not insulated well. I didn't know you have to keep hot and cold dripping, so my hot water was frozen.
The hot
Depends on how the flow is.
The cold was fine and the hot wasn't, and that didn't burst the pipe or anything, but it was fine.
Anyway.
So we had a lot of
I actually
things.
saw a picture that was posted of a single day. I forget which day it was, but this was actually from Florida.
Okay.
So it was like from Panama City or somewhere like that, and it compared it to I don't know, somewhere in Alaska.
Okay, sure.
Okay. And it was, Florida had 6 inches of snow on the ground. It was like 14 degrees. And they showed Alaska where they have had less snow. And it's green and warm.
Wow.
It's like, what is wrong with the world?
Something's wrong.
That's what my parents were saying. You've had more snow than we have, and they live in Indiana.
Right.
So.
And I just got back from Wisconsin, and there was dusting of snow on the ground, but I'm like, I had to come back to Louisiana to get the snow.
Yeah, it was bizarre. It was an interesting couple days, and we made it out, but the roads were terrible, and we were fortunate we were able to get out, but that first day when the pipe burst, I had to get to the hardware store, and I was getting a little nervous, but the sun was out, so that was nice. It melted most of when it was in the sun, the roads were fine, but in the shade, you go from fine to zzz, and you just have to be very, very, very careful.
Right.
But anyway, that is why we were not on the air last week, and we apologize. I guess I could use Facebook and tell you guys, but it doesn't seem like anybody comments on Facebook, so whatever. But anyway, so that was what we've been doing the last few weeks. Anything else you wanted to say? I don't think that was it. And it was just a wonderful, relaxing 4 or 5 days there we've had. So it was good to get back into
Georgia
saddle.
was good?
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, we rented a house there, and everyone came there and got to spend some time with the grandkids.
Yeah.
So that was fun. And we looking forward to another time we
did stop at the apple barn.
You stopped at the apple barn.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you were telling us, I didn't get the apple. I got the blackberry. They got the apple.
Okay.
But their ice cream.
I don't think I've ever had their ice cream.
For $3.50. He was going to charge me for one scoop, which is $2.50.
Okay.
But it was a waffle cone, and he basically had 3 scoops on there.
It was
He's like,
huge. He came walking to the table, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
it was really,
a lot
really
of
good.
ice cream.
Not quite as good as Baskin Robbins, but it was really, really good. And it was farm fresh and all that stuff for $3.50. I'm like, my goodness. So it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and I had myself ice cream. But it was really, really good.
That's what you get to do on vacation.
That's right.
So I was like, man, this is a good date night place, that we could go. They have hot apple cider. It's a quaint little place. So I'm like, can I move to Georgia just to go to the apple barn every week? No, that's bad.
Abby posted a picture from there, and she's like, guess where I'm at? And all my kids are like, no, that's not fair.
Oh, it was good.
Everybody remembers
it. It was good. And we got a bunch of stuff there, so it was fun. All right. Well, enough of the chit-chat of the week. So if you're back on YouTube, you can unpause. Does that even make sense?
No, I don't think they would have paused. They would have skipped. Whatever.
You can go back.
It's all good.
So, all right. So what do we have today, Chuck?
Well, I started looking at the notes, and I'm like, okay, so we're going to talk about the fact that we need to stop teaching young Christians.
No, it's not true.
Well, that's what it says, right? Stop teaching young Christians.
Yeah, stop. That was the salient title that you see. The point being was that we have an overabundance of teaching. Like there is no shortage of teaching, and especially in the information age, we have information, and this doesn't, what we're going to be talking about is not only just for child training, it's for churches, it's for everyday life. And we get so consumed sometimes with teaching that we forget about the training part. And we always talk about training, but training isn't a one-time event.
No.
Whereas I can learn something maybe in one day. I can read about it and be like, okay, I got it. I understand something, but do I really understand it? And that's the kind of the question here. And what sparked this idea was we were reading a book, and they were talking about why so many of the young people leave the faith by the time they get to college. Now, everyone's been writing books about this and talking about why children leave the faith. And there's probably a number of reasons. There's a number of reasons why kids leave the faith. But one is that, at least this person's idea was that we've just given them information. We just teach them. We preach at them, but we don't equip them. We don't equip them and train them how to handle different situations or different things.
So they have the knowledge,
Right.
but they don't really have the, what do you do with that?
Skills.
That's kind of, we were talking about math, and in geometry, I struggled, but I learned the information, and I could quote the postulates and theorems, but I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know how they worked.
You were just regurgitating information. You didn't know how to actually use the tool.
Information is good. And the example I would use is when Jeremiah and Joshua were young, they would read manuals. They didn't like to read kid books. They would read manuals, and I'm like, oh boy, what have we created? And they couldn't even read. But Jeremiah would go through and read some of these manuals and how-to books. We would get how-to books from the library. He had not used a tool yet, but he got the information. But all that information would be worth nothing if he never ever picked up a hammer or a screwdriver or tried it out. He just has information. But information is, you really lack experience. And so until you apply that information, it really kind of is kind of meaningless. It's kind of pointless in some fields. But, it's kind of like, there's a particular guy that I criticize a good bit because he's not married and he doesn't have kids. And he was very famous for teaching people how to do their marriage and how to do their kids, how to raise their kids. And I'm like, he has knowledge, but he doesn't have experience. Right. And that you could tell, there was just some kind of disconnect, and it just was weird, and I'm like, it does help that if you have that experience, and you can have an opinion, and you can have the knowledge, but I think having them together is actually very, very, very important.
Absolutely. I mean, who would want to go to have somebody, a surgeon, operate on you who's only read the book?
Yeah,
nobody wants to do that,
I think
right?
I did when I was a baby because until my stitch line was not very straight.
Same scenario. But sure, you want to impart the knowledge, but the practical application is where the training comes in, and that is more of a lifestyle environment scenario.
Yes. Yeah, and as for child training, that is, especially for us who homeschooled, they're around us 24/7. They see our whole life, and we have to live it out. Yeah. And they see that lived out, and that helps. That helps. But this is not just a child training thing, though. This applies to church, and this is where I feel like church fails tremendously. And we're talking about kids leaving the faith. Well, you start at church. You look at church. Well, what's the structure of church? Is that you show up to an event. Church is no longer interactive. It's an event. The preacher gets up and he might have a good message. I'm not doubting that. I've listened to sermons, but it's a message, and all it is information. It's information and goes in ear, one out the other, most likely. It depends on how boring they are. And, maybe they're exciting, and it holds your attention a little bit, and it makes you think a little bit. That's fine. That is good. Information is fine. But churches, if we look at the scriptures where you're trying to encourage one another, when you look at 1 Corinthians 14:26 and on, where you see how the meetings were, a little bit more interactive, and there is a structure to it, but there is an openness to where, hey, I can share something. Chuck can share something. I don't have to share something every week, but maybe I can encourage the younger people to start sharing in a group setting where it can be very intimidating. And you slowly do that because it helps them along, and you can kind of correct them and guide them while in front of a family-like setting, instead of just throwing them out there in front of someone and say, go preach, because preaching is good. I'm not mocking preaching, but to go out there and do it yourself, and to share something, and to be prepared to do even just a 5 to 10 minute little thing is a big deal.
Right.
And we don't train our young people to make that step. We send them off to Bible college to learn. And in fact, when I was in Bible college, I didn't learn how to do it. Guess what I had to do? They threw me out there, and I had to learn on the spot how to, what's my style? I don't know, because I'm getting up there and I'm probably boring everybody. But that is a big lacking thing that we see in churches, where they do Sunday school, which is information dumping, and then they preach at you, which is basically information dumping. Maybe excitable, information dumping, but it's still an info dump. And instead of training, and so we have these different scenarios where different, I don't know if we call them parachurch groups or whatever, but some churches have evangelism outreaches, and they kind of train how what to do. But guess who shows up to that? No one shows up. But there's other ministries out there that get you prepared, like the Answers in Genesis, any kind of creation, science, research, whatever. They do prepare you to handle the evolution creation debate. They do a very good job of equipping you for that. And so I think that is a good source of things, to be prepared for. But churches are very much lacking in preparing people to go into college, to go into any kind of field. And so when a kid goes into college, what do they hear at college?
They're going to hear somebody stand there and talk to them, basically.
Well, but they're not going to hear godliness. They're not going to hear
not at all. It's just going to be whatever subject matter is. It's just imparting of knowledge from a subject matter.
Well, right, but I'm saying that in the spiritual side of things, they're not hearing godliness, and they're not hearing what they were raised on.
Seek that out.
Right, and they're going to be deprogrammed and challenged on some thoughts. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of them aren't equipped to handle that. And, like, well, maybe we could do a better job at equipping them. And I think that is kind of what we're discussing, because I'm not against teaching.
Yeah.
We need teaching.
Yes.
So when we're thinking about the difference between teaching and training, so one thing to look at to understand is what's a goal of teaching versus a goal of training.
Good point.
Well, I think teaching is basically I just have information that I want to give to whoever I'm talking to.
It's usually like instructions before you actually do something. I know a lot of guys just chuck out the instructions and then try to figure it out. And then about 10 minutes later, go back to the instructions. So information is good. And it's kind of like the Bible, the law is good if used lawfully. But if the information, if used properly, is very useful. It is absolutely useful, but I have to apply it. And so the training aspect, now going back to the children especially, so we're taught to train up a child in the way he should go.
Yeah.
And so we're to train our kids, not just give them information. Now, they're going to get information one way or the other. I mean, especially their first few years, we're just trying to teach them words, but the whole point of raising our kids is to train them.
Yeah.
So you were talking off the air beforehand, right? I think it was before. It wasn't on the air.
No, it wasn't.
What were you saying about training?
Well, the main goal, I guess I see for our homeschooling that I've always come to is that I want to teach my children how to learn.
How to learn.
We're going to impart knowledge to them. We're going to teach particular subjects or study certain things, and we may not always do a good job of that. Consistency is probably the worst thing in homeschooling, right? But and the end goal is to teach them how to learn.
Right.
Where do you get the information? How do you take that information? How do you apply that information?
That's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Because if we just tell them, hey, this is how I was raised going to school, public school, and this is why I didn't do so well, maybe, is just tell me what's going to be on the tests. Just tell me what's going to be on the test so I can just get enough.
Yeah.
And I can remember when I was in Bible college, one of our teachers there said, "You're going to get an A in this class. Here's the answers to the test. It's going to be an open book test. You can use the Bible at the end, but don't worry about the test. You're going to pass. What I want you to do is think." And I was like, wow, so I don't have to worry about the tests? It's all right.
Yeah.
So that actually freed me up to be like, okay, so now let's think about what the Bible is actually teaching us and sharing us. And this was pastoral epistles class, so it was very important, which kind of helped take me to where I am today, But but I had the freedom not to worry about the information that I had to know, and I could just think. Yeah. And we could discuss those issues, and I could actually learn something. And I think that's the difference. You actually learn it a lot more by doing it yourself.
Right.
And I noticed that, like, you just went through Daniel. Yes. That you just taught through Daniel at church. We benefited a little bit from it, I'm not trying to slight you here, but
I understand.
We learn a little bit. But guess who learns the most?
The person who studies and teaches.
Absolutely.
Yes, because there's so much information that you're learning and you're diving into and you're digging in, and it means so much more to you that by the time you share it, you're probably only sharing about 10% of what you learned. Right.
Yeah.
And so we consume it, and we're probably only getting maybe even 5% of that 10%. Which is good, but we didn't have that experience. And that's why I think with churches especially, the encouragement is let's do this together.
Right.
And so it's encouraging us to go through Daniel, and you went through it slow enough. That's not criticism, but slow enough that we could.
You had the opportunity. Yeah, absolutely.
That we went through it together, and we basically were studying it together. And I think that is a benefit. Yeah. That it wasn't just Chuck up there preaching, even though that's what he was doing, but we just kept going over it. And by the time we got to the end, that we left for questions. There was discussion and learning, and then we can consume it in a better way.
Well, because you know something on such a different level when you teach it.
Yes.
And that's why, with the kids, even with math, I always, I try to encourage the one that's gone through that book to help the next one who's struggling, because I'm like, you're going to know
what
it.
Does Lydia do? Oof.
She's got nobody to teach. But
Jasmine.
Anyway, okay. But I'm like, if if Elizabeth shows Lydia how to do something, she's going to know it in a very different way than just going through it yourself. Because when you have to actually show somebody this is how you do it, you really got to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's in everything. Go ahead.
No, you take the idea of sports. When we look at sports,
exactly.
I mean, nobody teaches sports.
Right.
All right, you teach the rules. That takes about one day, a couple hours, hard to hear all the rules. Then you spend the next year, 2, 3, 4 training how to, how to actually perform.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, football is a good example because there's only so little games, and they practice and practice and practice and practice and their plays and all that stuff. They train for those very specific situations so that when we're there, same thing with the military. They train for very specific situations. Yeah. And that's what we should do. There are certain situations that are going to come up in our lives, especially in Christianity, where how do we talk to a stranger about Jesus? Well, you do it. You practice. Talk to people who have done it. Right. Get experience. And if you don't know how to, then go out with someone that has. Right.
That has, and they can show you. Well, and I think, talking about teaching versus training, I think teaching is to give information and knowledge, but I think training is more like to teach a skill, to show you how to do something, and I'm like, you think about, like I was talking to the girls earlier about, like, if I, on paper in a book, I show you a picture of a bike and I tell you how to ride a bike. You've never been on a bike. And I'm like, all right, you hold the handlebars and you put your foot, and I'm trying to explain it.
Get that? Okay.
You're like, okay. And I can explain the science behind why, it's going to work and whatever. But it's a whole different scenario when you get on the bike and you're like, oh.
And the first time you fall.
Right.
You're like, well, is this not supposed to happen?
But I'm like, that's, it's very different experience. And I think for so many things, even in our Christian walk, there's a lot of things that you've got to go do. Yep. And just on paper and just me telling you, okay, these are things that are good to do. It's like, we need to show our kids. We need to, teach in our churches or whatever. We need to show them, not just on, paper and with words. It's like,
well, it does help a little bit, but like I've said this before, but when I met my first Mormon, it was in a line to get a passport. I was going with a friend, and he's challenging us about the deity of Christ. And he's like, can you use anything other than John 1:1? And I'm like, well, why can't I just use that? And he's like, well, just use anything else. And I'm like, I'm just not there. Here I am in Bible college, and I can't think of anything else to prove the deity of Christ except for John 1:1. But well, they're prepared for John 1:1 too, and 1:1 also, not 1:2. But so they challenged me, and I failed. Right. So I go home, and guess what? Now I had the information, and I'm like, ooh, and I failed. So now, because of that experience, it made me want to dig deeper. And so the next time I saw one of those white-shirted, tie-wearing Mormons, multi-wife, whatever, I was prepared to confront him. And of course, the next time I talked to him, there was another answer. So the more experience I had with them, the more the information meant. Like now it means more to get that information because now it makes more sense. Yeah. And so I didn't quite understand what it meant, but now as he's talking to you, I'm like, oh, that's what he was talking about over here in the book. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, okay. Let me challenge him on that and see what he says. And it worked, how about that? Yeah. So, the information and the training have to go hand in hand. They have to. You can't just have information and learn. And I think that a big problem with our society today is that we live in the information age.
We do.
And it's just
readily available at your fingertips.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And so we feel like we know stuff because we can read it. But do we understand it? And that's
and know how to use it, what we know.
That's the thing. I mean, there's some things that we just, like how many people live in Chicago? I don't necessarily need to understand that. I need to know for whatever reason. But yeah, the applying these things. So they can apply in the family, they apply in the church and business and work. It's just, I know some of these things might seem like, no kidding, Mike, but we don't do it. So I don't know, there's some practical things that we can do, especially in our families, in our churches. The churches, I think, like I said, are really lacking, but what they can do is have classes there. They can have evangelism training. They can have apologetics, which I think I'm going to try to do at Bible study tonight, but, get people to think about things and be like, these are the questions that you're going to be challenged with at some point. What do you think? There's not going to be necessarily a right or wrong answer. Well, I mean, there's wrong answers, but what do you think? Like, let's think through this. We should teach people how to study the Bible. Like, instead of just giving the Bible and just read the Bible. How? I mean, did anybody teach you how to study the Bible, Chuck?
No.
Okay.
No, not really. I mean, I remember one youth pastor that helped me up for a short period of time. That I probably took some from that, but no, not really after that.
Yeah, even in Bible college, they didn't teach us how to study. They just told us what to believe.
Yeah, I mean, I knew how to look things up in like a commentary or the Strong's, look up words and whatever, but I wasn't taught how to do that, and I think that's huge, you know. And we tell people, and everybody knows you're supposed to study the Bible, but
how?
But what does that look like? And there's many ways, and there's not necessarily one right way or one wrong way. There's a lot of ways, but it's important to teach that so that people know. Okay, well that's how I do that.
Okay, so we've only mentioned a couple Bible verses, but there's one big one. I think it's what do you have it down there? It's 1 Timothy.
1 Peter 3:15.
Yeah, Chuck doesn't have the notes right
but
there.
Sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear.
Okay, that's the one we like to use for apologetics all the time. Be ready to give a reasonable response, to someone that asks, and we should be. But the one I was thinking about was, I think it's 2 Timothy 3:16.
All Scripture is given by inspiration.
Right. And what is it good for?
For reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness.
It depends on what version you use.
Some say training. King James doesn't say training.
Right, but it's teaching and training. Teaching and training or
instruction.
Right. So you have to have both there, and that's what the Word of God is for. It's for teaching and training.
Yeah. And it actually follows up with that the man of God may be thoroughly furnished into all good works.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're going to apply it.
Yes.
Right.
Not just having the head knowledge.
Yeah.
Yep. And I feel like that's where a lot of us are. We get the head knowledge. We go to church, and we're just a ton of times that was a good message. That was a good message. But what are we going to do with it? Yeah. Are we going to go out and, like you said, unto good works? Are we going to do something with it?
Which is, I think, something I've struggled with, because I like to listen to a lot of different teaching and, I'll go through the whole Revelation thing, and I'll go through stuff. And it's exciting to me, and I'm pumped. But then, I'll you'll ask me what I listened to, or the girls ask me, and it's like, it was just so good. And it's like, okay, but in what way? Like, what can you give? And I thought, and I talk to people about this, because I'm like, it's important for me to not just be excited, like, that's great. I need to be able to have something to share and to say, well, hey, this is something I got from this, and let me pass it on.
That's a good point. One good way to tell that you have understood it is that, can you teach it back? Yeah. There's so many people that can regurgitate things and make it sound good, but they didn't do the study for it, and it's not. I'm not against listening to things, because I do all the time. But then I have to go back and study it myself. And once I understand it, I can share it. Right. But there's so many people, like my wife over here, they listen to something and then they're like, I don't know.
It was just so good. You have to hear it. And I'm like, you're not going to go listen to it sometimes. So I'm like, well, then I should give you some of the exciting points and be like, well, what about this? What do you think?
It's like when I'll use this example that, the institutional church, you got a guy and he's talking to his people work or whatever, and he's telling them about Jesus, and they're like, well, tell him. He said, well, you should come to my church and listen to my pastor. I mean, he's really good. Yeah. Well, if you're saying that, you're not prepared, you're not equipped, and your church is failing you. You should be able to, at some level, maybe not perfectly, maybe not, as good, but you should be able to
give an answer.
Yes, exactly. On some level, you should be able to, hey, I'm here right now, because that's what the person's thinking is like, well, so I have to wait to Sunday and hear your pastor. And what do you know? What do you know?
Which is actually, I think, a huge skill for parents to teach their children, and it's good for all of us to basically know how to take what we're hearing or reading or studying and be able to share something. And so that's one thing that we did when the kids were young. I would sit at breakfast and we would read Proverbs, the proverb of the day.
Right.
And then just different times randomly we'd stop and be like, well, what do you think that means? Or what is this for? And I wouldn't, it's kind of open. It's not like you're on the spot and you have to prepare or something, but, it's just kind of fun, but it helps them to think and me to think too, like, what does this mean?
What do we just read?
Right. And so, I just think it's something easy that you can do.
So is this the practical section right now?
This is practical, yeah.
So the practical thing is ask questions, right?
Yeah, right. Ask them, what do you think? Or, if you're reading a book, what do you think? And do you think this was good, what he did here, and discuss it, and I think it's very natural and easy. And it's not like, I know some parents maybe could do this, but, like basically have their kids prepare a devotion or something. And, like, all right, Friday, I want you to share something.
Just don't make it like you're going to get punished if you do a bad job.
And, that's great if that works, but sometimes people feel so tense
Pressure.
and it's like they're not ready for that.
Right.
So I'm like, but you can do this and it's
but
very
you could
casual.
Challenge people a little bit.
Sure, but you can make it very casual and fun. And it's like, and they are happy to open up and it's lively discussion. I'm like,
if you've already created that atmosphere of asking questions and their response may be different than what you were hoping, but you don't, shut them down, which I have to be careful of not doing, like, sure, that's so stupid. They can't say that, especially when they're young.
Thinking of applications, practical applications, we talked about acts of service, meals, bringing meals to folks, visiting people, visiting the nursing home.
Right.
But you got one here, and I just got to understand it. It says you got to quote it. If you want to change your life, change your calendar. So, how's that come into service?
Well, because basically there are a lot of things we talk about, and it's like even, such as like going to a nursing home, or we should help our neighbors, or we should do. And
but we don't plan
think
it.
So often we just talk, and we have good intentions, but then we don't plan it. So it's like, you know what? We need to say, okay,
on this
how
day,
about let's do this? Okay, when are we doing? It's like our kids and your kids, they want to go pass out tracts, but it's like unless we put something on the calendar, it's not happening.
Change your calendar.
Yeah. So
and when I see it on the calendar, I delete it, and then I'm like, okay.
So I think it's just important for us to stop talking about things that would be good, and it's like, well, then, all right, let's do it. Can we do it this week? Can we do it next week? What is it going to take to put it together? But let's make it happen. So. Anyway.
Those are practical things that it should help.
But we want to teach our kids. That's a skill that I think is very important for all of us, is to learn to serve. So that's one thing you could do, is serve neighbors and friends and go.
Another way you can serve is by doing role playing.
No, that's not.
But why not?
That's a service?
No, not service, but another practical thing.
Yeah, practical application for training.
As you're like, okay, I'm going to play the part of
the person asking the question of how to,
right.
What does this mean? Explain to me why you believe what you believe.
Well, we did this just a couple weeks ago when we did an episode on evil. Like, if God is a loving God, then why is there
evil and suffering?
And if you haven't watched that, you should go back and listen to it.
Yeah.
But we asked a number of people, and stone-faced, like, I don't know. And to be fair, they're all young people, and some of them were our kids. So obviously we didn't train them good enough, I guess. They didn't really have a response. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of one of the bigger questions that most people are going to have.
Yeah.
And everyone's just kind of like, haven't even really thought about that, didn't think about that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're talking about. We give them a chance in a safe environment to kind of maybe like do role playing there and be like, okay, so what would you say? Okay, let me push back a little bit, and then as they get more advanced, maybe give them more advanced problems and see what they come up with. And,
I think also, a great way is you have with your kids with you, you go talk to somebody. Instead of, I think
you got to be willing
parents,
to do it.
Some parents want to push their kids, you go, and it's like, because you're scared to go yourself, and it's like, but I think.
But you have Lydia. She'll go, you go.
I know. And then I'm like, all right, I guess I have to. But I think it's important for me to go and let them see and kind of be in the shadow and listening. And so they're learning. And then next time I can be like, hey, you could at least start the conversation and I'll help you, and it's like.
That's where the Jehovah's Witnesses do a lot better job than we do, right?
They do, right. They absolutely do.
Yeah.
I mean, they're brainwashed, but they absolutely do a better job at that.
Yeah.
And in other ways, besides the role playing, is on the church level especially, is give them an opportunity to teach. give them an opportunity to do something. Like, we're so afraid of like heresy, And I'm like, look, these are kids. How are they going to learn?
Right.
And I'm not so much afraid of heresy, especially at that age, because we're not expecting some big, thing that they're going to say. But, then after they're done, we encourage them, like, hey, you did a good job. And like, hey, here's a couple things to think about. What about this? What about this? Mm-hmm. And you might want to stay away from the Trinity issue right now, because you're not very good at that.
Wow.
But
I mean, and even with, young people, let them have an opportunity to maybe, like for our girls, let them talk to the other girls and like prepare a 3-minute something, that they could just share, and like give them a time where they could get together and
let them
share
pray.
Something. Let them pray. Yeah,
we're really bad at this, like, because I find, we want to do it all the time.
I'll pray, but then it's like I never ask them to pray, and then it becomes like a scary thing, like, oh, you want me to pray, which
it shouldn't be.
So I found that it's like, okay, I don't mind praying for the food or praying for whatever. And, I've tried to make it a habit when people ask, somebody's sick or whatever, we'll just stop and pray right then, But it's like I try to often ask somebody else, like, hey, do you want to pray? And so that they can get used to it and without like feeling like, oh, that's a
make sure you want to point out to people that are kind of willing to, you don't want to put people on the spot.
Right.
And be like, hey, do you want to pray? No. Okay.
No, you don't want to. It shouldn't be a tense, like scary thing, It's like, hey, it's all good, So,
and I mean, if you're accustomed to it, it's not.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So it's just one of those things you have to get used to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we got through most of them. I know we didn't do the finances or relationships, but finances, we didn't really do a good job. I love talking finances.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I do. But you didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that. We're going to talk finances.
But I love finances. But my problem with my kids was more of an info dump, and I didn't let them. They spend their money how they want, but I didn't really teach them how to budget or how to do all these different things. It was just like, here's the information, but they didn't really have a practical outworking of that, and it shows. They all just waste their money. So
wow, oh my goodness, it's not even true. It's not even true.
So yeah, and
McDonald's, man.
Yeah, McDonald's.
We have some givers, and they are very generous, and that's good.
That's very good.
That's a great thing to teach your kids, is to give.
Yeah. Yes. That's another thing, But there's so many things that we get creative, and you can read about how to be. Oh, I'm just kidding. Yeah, but you can. There is a lot of information on how to do these different things. We just have to be willing to. The difference is training takes time.
Yes,
it takes time, and we used to have training moments. The kids still remember it, and we would.
You'd actually set them up and.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we would just train like, okay, we're gonna. And this was just because, but we would throw the laundry out, and I'd give them a minute to separate their laundry, see if they could work together, and they could never do it. But it was just like, do it again, and it's just like, we're never going to be able to finish. And I'm like, with that attitude, you're not. They keep working together, and I'd fudge the time a little bit until they got it, But they would, okay, this is yours, this is yours. They weren't just getting their stuff; they would kind of work together, and different things that you could do, where you train them in different things, and you make it fun. Don't make it a punishment.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I mean, there's some things in life that is just going to be miserable, and you have to do it. And you just have to do it.
Yeah,
that's training.
That's part of training too. Is realize that you're going to do stuff you don't like to do.
Yeah, it's just over and over and over again. Sometimes, But hey, I played sports and we did the same thing over and over. But it was for a reason. At least that's what they told us.
I realized that this today. I realized it's like this is the first week of the year that I got to work 5 days, and I don't want to do that either. This is a 5-day work week. What in the world?
Well, there's still one more. Something could happen, Chuck. So hold on.
Well, and the last thing I have is that remember that training is not a one and done. So like basically we're not too old to still be training.
That's true.
And you look at many professions and they have continued education.
There's conventions,
and they keep going.
You continue in education.
So like this is not just for our kids. So all right, let's get them all. It's like it's for us too. Like we need continually to be working and to continue our training because we knew how to share the gospel and we knew how to study our Bible and we knew however long ago. So now we're good. We're done.
There's always new techniques.
Done.
Speaking of which, there's a guy that we met who lives in Hammond, Ronnie Cooksey. You know, he's a pastor over there.
Covington.
Yes, in Covington, Louisiana. And at the end of February, maybe I don't have the information in front of me, but they have a men's conference, a one-day men's conference where they, talk about men's stuff and, do different things. So kind of like what we're talking about, preparing, different things. They have a whole day sessions and different speakers. So if you're in the Covington area, come check it out. I forget what day it is.
The 22nd.
Sarah knows. 22nd of February. So in a few weeks, I'm sure we'll talk about it again.
My anniversary.
Day before. How about that? Wow. Chuck getting married February 21st.
22nd is before the 23rd.
You said the day before.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Anyway.
So you got married the 23rd. Whatever. All right. That should be it for this segment.
Marriage.
All right. Am I supposed to jump in early there? Okay. So was that a different sounder? Okay. That's the same one we used a long time ago. Okay. So as you can see, we are doing a marriage moment, a minute or whatever it's called.
Marriage minute. Here we go.
It can't be a minute because it's never a minute.
Okay. Yeah,
so
that's
marriage
true.
moment. So we're taking a little break from the going through knowing your Bible and all that. We've stopped at the Old Testament. We're getting ready to go in the New Testament. We have some different ideas we want to do with that. So we wanted to, by popular demand, or at least by one person, we wanted to do the marriage moment again. And then this week, so we're not necessarily going to be talking about a particular topic, but this is like a preamble. It's going to be a challenge out there. So Sarah over here, my wife, wanted to challenge me to do something, and I wanted to throw it out there. Now, we went on a trip, a vacation, like we talked about earlier, and on the trip, we discussed some of this, but we went through a number of books, marriage books, and Christian marriage books, and so we ordered them, and we're going to read. So here's the challenge that we're going to do. We're going to read them like 20 minutes a day, couple, maybe a chapter, 2 chapters, or whatever, and then we're going to discuss them. Talk about them, and just go through it. We've read a number of marriage books in our time, but this is going to be together, and then we're going to discuss the issues, and then maybe bring some of it on the air. I don't know. Right.
Well, so I looked up. I had you look up while I was driving marriage books that were between 2 and 3 hours or under 3 hours. And so, because if it's a 2 to 3 hour read, then that means that over the course of 1 week, if you do 20 to 30 minutes a day, then
she's the smart one.
Then you've gone through the whole book. And so, there's a lot of great marriage books that are longer. But I thought, well, if we could do one a week, then, I just think each book, hopefully you would have some kind of takeaway, something that you'd be like, hey, I like this one.
I was talking to someone and they're like, I don't read Christian marriage books. And I'm like, well, why? Yeah. You're married. Why wouldn't you read a Christian marriage book? Yeah. And I know that sometimes there's maybe controversial issues and there's maybe things you disagree with, but in the whole scope of things, you can read something and get something out of it. If you don't like something, don't apply it.
Exactly.
So that's kind of what I should say I have no idea. We know some of these authors. We're going to go through some of these things and discuss some of these issues, and maybe one day we'll write our own book. And
maybe one day.
But it seems like there's a lot of marriage books out there, and generally speaking, I think they say the same things for the most part.
Probably, but with each perspective, some things tend to hit home a little more, or they make more sense, or something that like, hey, we could do that.
Yeah, we're all in different places, and for whatever reason, maybe at a certain time, we needed this, or because of my personality, this one, favored my point of view a little bit. Yeah. Maybe not my point of view, it favored me, but it hit me a little bit more. Right. And so anyways, we're going to do that. And if you want to try that at home, we can give you the list of books. But You don't have to do our books, but figure out some books on your own and go through it with your spouse, and just 20 minutes a day, and then just discuss and like, what do you think? And guys, don't dominate the conversation, or ladies, don't dominate the conversation. Let this be, don't criticize their thoughts. You're trying to get to know their thoughts. And we've done this for many years, maybe not in a specific time frame like this, but we've discussed many books that we've read in the past, and it's been fun. And usually we're on the same page. There's some times that maybe we're not. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but we'll discuss it and be like, well, what do you think about this? And there's some things that I can always implement when I'm reading one. Like we were talking about the five love languages. I'm not a huge fan of it, just because I think there's some major issues with that, where you're focused in on, this is what I am. But I've taken a lot away from that and be like, hey, I need to think about how I can show my love in many different ways, but especially the one that maybe you receive. And so that any book that you come across, you can get something out of. Hopefully, if you can, then that's tough. But anyway, so that's our challenge these next couple weeks, maybe months. I don't know how long we're going to get through these books, but I can get through a book pretty easily because of my job, and I can listen to a book pretty quickly. But you want to go through it 20 minutes at a time.
I want to go through it together, where we have the actual book in our hands and we read it.
That is true.
It is 20 minutes, maybe 30 if you pick a longer one.
Yeah, and I guess that's the challenge. Doesn't matter the book, doesn't matter whatever. It's going through something together and then discussing it. Yeah. And, we've done that kind of separately, where I'll be listening to something, you'll be listening to something, we'll talk about it. And you can do that too. This is just our thing that we're going to try. Yeah. So, hey, if you want to join us, let us know how it goes, and email us, or go to Facebook and tell us the books that you guys are going through, and maybe we'll join those books.
Should be fun.
Should be fun.
Missionary Stories with Chuck.
Alrighty, well, we just had a funny moment, because on our trip, we were listening to Unshackled, which they put on these kind of cheesy audio dramas, about a half hour long, and we decided to listen to one. And I was thinking of Chuck, because I was like, oh, he should listen to, we give him one a week, and he can listen to it, and then he could tell us the story. And we were listening to one called Mary Slessor. And that's what he's doing this week.
That's who we got.
You didn't listen to the Unshackled.
I did not.
That is crazy. So because I was like, we haven't done Mary Slessor yet, and you're like, no, and I was like, oh, maybe we should get Chuck to. So we haven't even talked about that. So this is meant to be.
Meant to be. So listen up, people.
Yes. So what about Mary Slessor?
Oh, well, there's something about Mary Slessor that has turned her into a legend.
Yes.
By the time she died, she was as well known as one of her models, David Livingstone. Mm-hmm. Today, her name is still highly regarded both in native Scotland, where her image appeared on a 1997 Clydesdale Bank 10-pound note.
That's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And on her mission field of Nigeria, where she's often remembered as Queen of the... Did you say it?
They said it in the audio drama, but
Queen of the Akiang. And yet, as much as her commissioning board appreciated her achievements, they were baffled by her insistence to venture into the forest, where natural dangers, protective tribes, and oppressive climate and frightened most European missionaries.
Yeah.
To make these things worse, she discarded many of the typical Western precautions. In her effort to become one of the natives, she walked barefoot, drank unboiled water, and shunned both the protection of mosquito nets and sun hats. Thanks. To some foreigners, she looked mad and dangerous.
She is Irish, right? Yeah, she was Irish, right?
No.
I don't know.
Scottish. Scottish.
Yeah, is that what we said? Scotland. Yeah, Scottish. That's right. While she fully understood that God's timetable differs from ours, because she famously said Christ never was in a hurry, Slessor had little patience with the missionary board's hesitations. It was the challenge of bringing the gospel to an unreached population that had moved her to approach the mission board in the first place, and she was not about to sit with other missionaries in the relative comfort of a coastal town. Despite her small frame and timid personality, which she famously was afraid of crossing the road alone and standing in a field if there was a cow.
Wow, that's interesting, because the audio drama, it didn't make it seem like she was timid.
Yeah. Well, it's odd because she's got these things, but yet she's willing to venture out, and go. So she was used to challenges because of these things. So born on December 2nd, 1848 in Gilconston, a suburb of Aberdeen, Scotland. She was only 10 when their father's alcoholism and consequent unemployment forced her to work as a weaver in the textile mills of Dundee to support her family. And yet, after her 12-hour work schedule, she found time to improve her slim education and later to serve as a missionary teacher in the local United Presbyterian Church. Then in 1873, captivated by the flurry of reports following the death of David Livingstone, she applied to her denomination's Foreign Mission Board. 3 years later, with only minimal training, she was off to Duketown, Calabar, near the southeastern coast of present-day Nigeria. Following the board's advice, she spent time with the local women to learn their language, Ethic. But she was surprised that none of them had yet joined the church. She says, something must be done for the women here if we are to raise the men, she said. Throughout her life, teaching the women and improving their oppressed condition remained one of her main commitments. Once she had mastered the language, she asked the board's permission to move 3 miles away from the coast where most foreigners lived. In 1885, when her mother and sister, her last surviving family members, died, she considered her ties with her homeland irrevocably severed. Heaven is now nearer to me than Britain, and no one will be anxious about me if I go up country. And up country she went, eventually settling in the district of Audible. Schleser's greatest emphasis was on the gospel she conveyed to everyone she met, resting on God's power to transform hearts. She came close to marriage in 1891. Was that in the audio drama? Mm-hmm. No, interesting. She came close to marriage in 1891 when Charles Watt Morrison, a Scottish missionary teacher in Duketown, who was 18 years her junior, proposed to her while she was sick on leave. Asking for the board's approval, Schleser and Morrison specified that he would join her in Audible and not the other way around. She left the matter to the Lord. If it be for his glory and the advantage of his cause there to let another join in it, I will be grateful. If not, I will still try to be grateful as he knows best. So when the mission board refused to allow Morrison to move, the engagement was off.
Wow.
Schleser's family became the twins she adopted in order to save them from death. I'm sure that was part of the drama, right?
No. It was really specifically one of
the twins. They mentioned the twins.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
that was kind of
her family became the twins she adopted to save them from death, as some African tribes believed that twins were the resulting of a coupling of evil spirits. Schleser worked hard to prevent the murders of these children and their mothers until the local chief agreed to declare the custom unlawful. Schleser exercised an even greater influence on the local laws and customs starting in 1892 when the British government, impressed with her interaction with the locals, appointed her vice consul of the region presiding over the native court. She was the first woman to hold such a position. In 1905, she became vice president of the Ikot Abong Native Court. To some Western observers, her judgment seemed unconventional. Quote, she was an expert at settling quarrels, Mina Amos, who lived with Schleser for some time and carried on some of her work, remembered during an interview. Once she told 2 warring chiefs, I will prick your hand and his, and you can suck each other's blood. Her greater emphasis, however, was on the gospel she conveyed to everyone she met, resting on God's power to transform hearts. Eventually, after years of hard work and exposure to the elements, a painful and crippling form of rheumatoid arthritis forced her to take long periods of rest. Still, she kept on her post as long as she could. She died of fever and dysentery on January 13, 1915, at 62 years of age. But her energy and vision continued with some of the missionaries she had trained, and her memorials stand as a reminder for the church not to rely on comfortable arrangements. As James Luke wrote in The Record in 1904, where the church has failed, a single woman has stepped into the breach. But Schleser would have put it in simpler terms. After all, it comes back to this, she says. Christ sent me to preach the gospel, and he will look after the results.
Yep.
You want more about Mary Schleser? You can read a book called Everybody's Mother, The Era and Impact of a Victorian Missionary by Jeanette Harditch, or Mary Schleser of Calabar, Pioneer Missionary by W.P. Livingstone.
Yeah, and And if you want to hear the audio drama, I mean, what was it called?
Unshackled.
I know they have a podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can search for this particular story, but Mary Schlesser, it was a very, very particular time when she went in to the tribe and to talk about the twins and rescuing the twins and talking to the witch doctor and all that stuff. It was really well done. I mean, it's not the greatest acting, but they got a limited, I don't know how limited a budget, but they've done thousands. So Unshackled, go check them out.
Yeah.
They kind of had that old radio, old time radio, you feel.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where we heard the story. I mean, we've heard of her name. We were like, it sounds familiar from somewhere, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And then here we go.
Wow.
That's funny. All right. Well, thanks, Chuck.
Music with Sarah.
What song do you like?
All right, babe. Well, this is going to be a different song of the week.
It's a different one. Every week is a different one.
It is different. But this week, I heard you playing it earlier, and I was like, you were looking at sheet music, and it almost sounded like a hymn, but it also sounded like a choir song, like a chorale or whatever. And I guess we would be right.
Yeah.
Both. It's kind of a hymn, but it's not really a hymn.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a hymn in that it has like 4 verses and then this chorus part or whatever. So, but the song is called "For Me to Live as Christ" by the Wilds.
That's Philippians.
That is Philippians 1:21. And this song I've heard, I don't know, I heard it some time ago and added it to my liked playlist. And then recently, in the last, I don't know, a couple of weeks, the song's just been running through my head. And so, I don't know, I like obviously Philippians 1:21, where Paul says, "For me to live is Christ, to die is gain," which is the chorus of the song, basically. Right. And that's just kind of been what I've been thinking about. And this song is just beautiful, I will say. Like, I love the way they do it. I think last year I wanted to do it for the choir for our camp.
Right.
But it would help if people knew it because it's a little bit complicated.
It is obscure somewhat.
It takes some talent to sing the way they do, so you'll have to hear it. But it does. It's just a very rich song. I mean, like I say, it has 4 verses, like hymns. And sometimes hymns have all the rich theology and whatever. Well, this one has that.
Oh, wow.
So for those of you that don't want a 7-Eleven song and want something that has more depth to it, here's your song. So
you're not getting your Slurpee?
No,
7-Eleven?
No. But I mean, it just starts, "In life or death, I'll not despair. My hope in him I'll boldly share. To live is Christ, to die is gain. I seek to magnify his name." And then the second verse, "He came to earth in servant form to bear the cross, the shame, the scorn. This mind of Christ I'll make my own, to serve with humble heart alone." And then the third verse probably is my favorite. I don't know.
That's the one they usually skip, right?
Yeah, a lot of times, yeah. It says, "To know my Lord surpasses all, to press toward him my single goal, to know his victory over the grave, to know his mighty power to save." And then they don't go to the chorus after that one. They just go to the next verse and have a key change or something. I mean, it's pretty cool. Then they say, "So joy in Christ and never cease, and run to him. He brings true peace. Content in him in every state, and all be strengthened by his grace." So I just find, like I say, it's so rich. It's beautifully done. And anyway, I think it's a great song.
Yeah,
so.
well, great. I mean, it is we could provide the sheet music too.
Yeah,
if you know how
sheet music if you're into that. So,
but yeah, it is almost like a musical sound.
I can see how you would say that. And the chorus does say, "For me to live is Christ, for me to live is Christ, pursuing him my highest prize, for me to live is Christ." So it's a very simple chorus, but I love that because I do feel like that's the highest prize, is pursuing him, that I might know him.
Yep.
That's what Paul said, and I feel like the same.
Philippians 1:21, you say?
Yes.
For live is Christ, die is gain.
Yeah.
And in Philippians there, he's also, I haven't attained yet.
Right.
I press forward to the high calling. And all these things in Philippians are pointing towards knowing Christ more and more. And in fact, when Philippians was written, he was close to the end.
Yeah.
And so I think he understood that a little bit more, but Paul, of all people, knew that from the very beginning. I mean, Christ showed him all the things he was going to suffer and all that. So he didn't have a reason to stick around necessarily, except for, to be with them is better for them. But to be with Christ is even better.
Yeah, well, and that's how I feel. I mean, like, I look forward to being in heaven with Jesus. That's like, we made it. Yeah. That's the big grand finale. That's where I want to be. But I realize right now, my time here is not over. So I have things to do, and I'm happy to be here.
And we're glad to have you. So
I love the life I have here, but I definitely by far look forward to being there with him.
By far.
So, yeah.
Cool. Well, to check it out, I don't even know where you could find this.
It's on Spotify. It's on an album called God Has Spoken.
God Has Spoken.
It was in 2018. They came out with this. I don't know who they are. I don't know anything really about them.
Great. They could be.
But, I do know. I looked them up briefly today. And
The Wilds?
The Wilds, and it seems like they put on camps. And,
like us?
Yeah, kind of like that. But they have a facility. Maybe they have a facility there, and they do all sorts of different camps, and so they sometimes produce music for the camp. So I was like, hey, I would have liked to have been there.
There you go. Well, there you have it. The Wilds, and it's called, what's the album again?
It is called God Has Spoken.
God Has Spoken. Yeah. Go check it out. Spotify. I don't know where, if it's on YouTube or whatever, but go check it out.
Yeah.
The Mike Charleston Show is brought to you by Fellowship of Believers. For more information, go to our website at fellowshipofbelievers.org. Thank you for listening. We hope we have encouraged you to stand strong in the Lord Jesus and grow in Him.